Whether you're pitching a product, negotiating a raise, or deciding which movie to watch, we all navigating the art of selling in one way or another. Welcome to Power of Soft Skills in Sales. I'm Evgeniy, your guide to unlocking the human side of selling. Here we explore the connection, communication, and collaboration skills that make interactions more impactful. Get ready for inspiring stories, teamwork tips, insight on trust, and actionable advice to help you sell smarter and connect deeper. Let's jump in.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. I'm Evgeniy. I decided to interview people during writing my book about soft skills, and I interview quite a lot of people while writing the book. And there was an idea to continue with interviewing people I trust, I work with as well, about soft skills and their journey about soft skills. We have Brian today. We have a special topic and a special theme today to talk with Brian about soft skills. Brian, can you please tell me about yourself and the audience as well?
Yes, thank you, Evgeny. It's nice to spend the time with you as always. I've got an interesting background in that my background is sort of evenly split across three main areas. The sort of first third, I was a security consultant doing penetration tests, incident response, et cetera, all around the world in the late 90s and early 2000s when, there was security was really just starting to truly take off. And at the tail end of that part of my journey, I started to shift more into the product side. So designing products. I founded the first attack and breach simulation product in 2002, the first risk-based vulnerability management product in around the same time, which is Red Seal Networks, which is still around. And then that started the transition into the third leg, which was partnerships. If your Red Seal models your network, and if you need to model networks, you need to have access to all the network devices and their config files. So we need to form partnerships to facilitate getting that. So natural started the move more into partnerships. And I found that I really liked that aspect so much, in fact, that in an odd coincidence, I was talking to a small production company in Hollywood around technology, and they asked me to join as their transmedia producer. So I spent 3 years putting together business deals in Hollywood around transmedia production, marketing campaigns, and how you can promote films and monetize them in different ways. And I was surprised at how similar it was. And then I came back to cybersecurity, and since then have been focused solely on partnerships. And I mainly focus on technology partnerships, MSSPs, consultants, OEMs, tech partnerships, not so much as VARs, which is actually related to our topic today, because I think that the VAR side of things, you really want to be strong in those soft skills and being weaker. And also, I think some of the special topic for today is I am autistic. So that lack of soft skills, the disability around the autism, which also causes problems with soft skills, really drove me towards excelling around the tech partnerships more than the other partnerships in a number of different ways.
Having said this, even the technical partnerships still required connection with people, still required communication. So for the people that don't know, and honestly, I don't know myself, what's the issue with autism and soft skills and connecting to people?
So there's a number of things. And first off, the one thing to keep in mind is a lot of people look at autism as black and white. You either are or you aren't, or, oh, you're autistic, you're this. It's a really interesting thing because it's what is called neurodivergent as opposed to neurotypical. So my brain functions in a different way than other people. However, my brain does not function in the same way as other autistic people. And it's more like a spider diagram where you might be stronger or weaker in certain areas versus even somebody else in your family that is also autistic. So that causes issues. But what the commonality is, you tend to not pick up on social cues. Environments where you're typically using soft skills, for example, at a cocktail party, the noise and the distraction. One of the ways I've tried to describe it to people is your TV is playing 20 channels at once and you have no control over the remote. So you've got all these conversations around you and your mind is trying to pick up on all of them and follow all of them, which makes it really distracting, really stressful. The fact that you don't pick up on social cues, you can't read body language, or you have issues reading body language, how you present, you're often more direct. You often take things more direct. So if somebody says something, drawing a blank is a good example, but you don't interpret what is said to you as loosely as other people were. So common chit chat that you would have in getting to know somebody can be taken very literally by somebody with autism. And that causes problems because a lot of those soft skills are, things like, oh, let's build a rapport with each other. How was your weekend, etc. And those are things just autistic people don't think about.
You mean they don't think about it to ask or don't want to talk about them because they want to get to the point more quickly?
So I would say it's a combination of the two. It's not a desire to get to the point more quickly, although that does pop up when you're in even a technical discussion. It can be very frustrating when everybody's sort of like 2 or 3 steps behind where the answer is. And everybody's going to get to the answer, but everybody wants to just talk about it longer. That is a frustration point, but it's also just you don't think about it. It's just I have over the years, I was only diagnosed with autism about 10, 15 years ago. And finally, it was because I was having so many problems in my professional life. I was like, I don't know why I'm experiencing this. And what I worked on with a therapist who understands autistic people, works with professional autistic people, because there are non-vocal, children that are autistic that are non-vocal, and they have a lot more issues just in their day-to-day life. I would be what is called a high-functioning autistic, or what used to be called Asperger's, which is no longer a term used. But I learned to basically just do this, just out of habit. Kind of like you teach your kids to wash their hands after they eat or when they go to the restroom. They don't think about why they're doing it. They do it just because they were told. So a lot of what I have learned that is around soft skills or become soft skills is around that aspect of just, when you meet somebody, ask them stuff like this. And especially in noisy environments, it can be difficult because I'm trying not to just, like, for example, I'm just going to tell them a story and just go into autoplay mode, listen to what they're saying, ask them follow-up questions. And you're really sort of having to struggle in your mind to do that because your mind wants to jump all over the place or jump to telling a story or jump to something that you're, quote, obsessed with, versus slowing down and talking to them. All the things that, again, are related to those soft skills.
So thank you for joining and talking about this, because I have some of my distractions in life as well. So I understand some of the things you're talking about. I'm very impatient. And I think there's many people that don't understand this about themselves, and probably even more people that don't understand when people acting in a different way, how they act. I'm wondering, do we know how many people are autistic? Is there any percentage, any studies?
I wish I knew off the top of my head what those were. Yes, there are. It goes undiagnosed a lot in girls because girls tend to be very good at what is called masking. So that goes to what I was just saying, where you're basically putting on a front and thinking about the person who's talking to you and doing something that is very counter to what your mind wants you to do. It's sort of that, in a lot of ways, that fight or flight reflex where normally somebody would run and somebody like a fireman has to overcome that flight and actually fight through and go into the fire. Masking for an autistic person is very similar. Nowhere near, obviously, it's not life-threatening, but it's very much you're putting on a front, you're acting in a certain way to appear as normal as you can. Girls are very good at that because they're sort of brought up to do more playhouse. So they go much longer undiagnosed. They have different sets of problems because of that. And it also includes a lot of other things. So two of my daughters are also autistic. And we believe my wife's father was also autistic. But between me and my two daughters, that spider diagram is all very different. And so, for example, my youngest daughter, she has what is called misophonia. So certain noises will cause an emotional reaction to her. So if we're in a restaurant and she can hear the person behind her eating, it will cause her to cry. So she has earplugs that she takes with her everywhere. But she is the most comfortable in a social environment out of me and my oldest daughter. So even the mix between the three of us is very, very different. And we had brain scans done, and all three of our brain scans were different. And the doctor was like, just by the brain scan, he was like, I can give you broad brush on this is how social anxiety is for Abby, Sadie, and you. It was very interesting, but it's more than you would think. I think there's also a little bit like there were a lot of people that were just Asperger's, which is now, it's always been related to autism, but now it's like in the, what is it, the MD5 book, the psychology diagnosis book, it's now been moved under autism. So it's not a standalone thing. And I think there's far more people, and it is a spectrum. You've got people that are very good and very intelligent, but just feel off. Like Elon Musk is probably autistic. Engineering people, we like repeats. We like to get up. So a lot of people you see, and I'm drawing a complete blank, Apple executive, what is his name?
Oh, yeah, yes.
He's passed away, but he always wore jeans and a black shirt.
You mean Steve Jobs or?
Yeah, Steve Jobs. Thank you. I don't
Yeah.
know why I couldn't think of his name. I believe he was autistic. And one of the things, the reason I think he wore the black shirt is we like certain fabric textures bother us. So we like that repeat. We will very happily eat the same thing. Like one of the great memes I saw was why autistic kids like crackers. And it was like, it had a picture of a cracker, 5 crackers, and then it had a picture of 5 grapes. And it was like, cracker tastes the same way every time, the grape tastes different.
It's an interesting one to say this.
Yeah, so it just, yes, there are a lot of it. A lot of people that are on the engineering side tend to be on the spectrum, maybe not enough that most people would recognize, but a lot of people think that if you go into engineering and you're really good at coding, et cetera, you've got some of those autistic traits because it tends to help you with that kind of stuff. You tend to think more logically than others. So there are some people out there that are probably on the spectrum, but not at a level where they necessarily have any of the negative aspects. But we also have a lot of what our family calls Aspie superpowers to try to liven them up, because we've known our 2 daughters were autistic from a very early age. So mine, for example, is one of them. I'm very good at understanding large blocks of data and how they're related at an instinctual level faster than most other people can at an intellectual level. And that doesn't mean I'm a mathematician or anything. It just means I'm able to understand and see the connections between things faster and usually in different creative ways than others.
This is very interesting, and we didn't even dive into soft skills. We're just talking about general terms right now, and it's definitely very interesting. And I hope this show will help many people to understand more about themselves. We're not trying to paint any pictures. We're not trying to say anything bad or good. We just want to help people to understand more about themselves and about the environment and potentially become a much better person. Would you give any advice to someone that talking to a person and they don't know if they're autistic or not, but they see maybe the conversation is not going well. If there's any ideas to understand maybe the person is autistic, and if they do understand, if there's a better way to communicate in this case.
Yeah, so and I think this is, whether you're talking to an autistic person or just somebody, it's related to, the soft skills, and it is a very good skill to pick up because people do have different communication methods. They have different learning methods. Some are visual learners, some are auditory learners. I am a big visual person. I love whiteboards. So I like to sketch things out. So if you're having a conversation with somebody and you really just feel they're not getting it, try a slightly different way. Don't necessarily just use different words. Certainly don't just repeat the same words over and over again, but try a different approach. I use a lot of analogies when I try to explain stuff. I try to use visual relationships. So try different ways to communicate with them and try to be literal. A situation, especially with autistic, but I find even without that, the more literal you can be, the more factual you can be, the easier that communication can flow. So I'll give you a business example. While I was at a company called Lastline, I did a significant amount of OEMs of a piece of Lastline technology to a lot of the firewall manufacturers all over the world. And this was when sandboxing was really just starting to work its way into networking devices. So it wasn't really established like what pricing it was, et cetera. And we were trying to build a forecast. And I had built a rapport with the partner. And I asked them, how much firewalls do you sell? How much are you predicting to sell? And because we had that relationship, they gave me model by model how many of each model they had sold on a monthly basis going back 2 years and what they were forecasting going forward 2 years. And I was able to build a model. They also built two models, a low and a high. I just built a middle one. And we came back together, and our 2 year forward forecast was never off by more than 1%. And we were never under our forecast. We were always over our forecast, but never more than 1%. So a really good forecast. But we did that by full communication, not, oh, we're going to sell a lot and soft language, which it was more very concrete. Here are facts and here are our goals, and being open and literal with each other, as opposed to sort of that just, well, we want to sell a lot and we're going to work with you to increase that and et cetera. It was just factual driven. So I think when you're communicating with somebody, the more factual you can be without sort of, you're not trying to be a storyteller. You're not reading a kid's book at the library and trying to entertain kids. You're trying to communicate back and forth. And that can cause problems because different people use different words. And I see this a lot in the security space where I've done some analysis for companies as part of my go-to-market consulting work where, oh, you're using words that are used by 5 other market sectors. And therefore, you're not coming across as what you are, you're coming across as 5 other things. When communicating with people, the same thing can happen. If you start to use those less words with less specificity, then it opens up to interpretation. And then, if you're talking to somebody autistic, then it really, and this drives my wife crazy because she'll say something and I take it literally. And then she's, no, that was a joke. So we just don't get it. So picking up on that, if you tell a joke and somebody doesn't get it, you might be talking to an autistic. They might have just missed it. Don't immediately go, oh, this person doesn't have a sense of humor or they don't like me. They may not have gotten it. They may not have even picked up on the fact that you were trying to tell a joke because as an autistic, I'm not seeing it in your face. and I'm reading the words literally, so I'm not necessarily getting the joke. So again, if you're talking to people, that being clear, concise, the more you can do that, the better.
Very good examples. So what are soft skills for you? Let's try to define them.
For me, it's really things like, you know, trying to touch base with people on a regular basis. I use LinkedIn a lot for that. So like I try to pay a lot of attention to, oh, such and such had a birthday, or such and such started a new position, so that I can use that as a point to reach out to them and maintain that contact in a way I wouldn't normally do, or I wouldn't necessarily remember that today is their birthday. That's why I put all of that stuff in a calendar. It's why a lot of times I go on Facebook, not for the social platform, but I just see everybody that I'm connected to. Oh, it's their birthday today, and make sure that I send them a message. It's trying to look at when I reach back out to somebody I haven't talked to in a while, going back and looking at LinkedIn or my emails to see, hey, what did I communicate with them before? I try to take notes on people that I'm actually building a relationship with, on, oh, do they have kids? What topics of interest do they have? And then bringing that something back to that. So I play a lot of board games. And for example, if I'm talking to somebody that I know plays board games, then I'll go, oh, did you try this new game? So it's basically treating that almost like homework. I look at, for example, Google News. So with everything going on in the world, I know people in certain areas of the world. I won't politicize it by naming any specific locations, but looking at the news and seeing, oh, is there something going on in their area or their culture, et cetera, and referencing that. Do I know what their sports team was? So some of it, it's like those basic connections. That's one piece. And I really had to learn that piece and work on it over and over. The other one,
I'm going to stop here for a second because you mentioned something very interesting. You needed to learn this. So maybe let's go between the right and left and tell me more. How did you learn them? How did it happen?
So some of it I watch. And before I was diagnosed, I would watch. And those aspects, I would just be going, oh, when is this meeting going to start? When can we start talking about why we're here, as opposed to what your sports team did that weekend? Some of it was observation, but I never understood, because it didn't have any meaning for me. I didn't really understand it. So once I was diagnosed, then it was like, okay, I still don't necessarily understand it, but I know it's something that needs to be done. Like, you don't understand necessarily how gravitational fields work, but you know that the sun is going to come up in the following, the next day. This is like, I don't necessarily understand why this is so important to people, but I don't necessarily care, because I know it's important to them. Therefore, I'm going to do it. So then I worked with my wife, who's neurotypical. She's very social, even though she's an introvert, she's very social. And when we go somewhere, she would guide me. Oh, you didn't do this. Oh, remember this, his name is Bob and he does this and this. So she would give me those cues. As I became diagnosed, as I did it, it really accelerated. My growth was sort of logarithmic, because I went from like not caring or knowing to knowing, getting a few skills, and then being able to apply them, seeing the value of applying them, and then just going, oh, now I need to make sure more of this, and oh, I'm going to remember more about this person.
Now, when you're applying them, do you understand more, but you also have your own hobbies? So, for example, I'm going to try to play with this a little bit. You and me been talking for probably a couple of years. We have a monthly call, and we always have topics to talk about. Even so, we have a maybe work-related topic, we always talk about something else. And it's not always, at least I feel, just a social play. We can talk about AI. We can talk about partnership. We can talk about different dashboards. We can talk about different ideas. So at least I feel it's a focus that's interesting you. So you have your own hooks, your own topics of interest that you will want to talk about them, and you probably care about it. Even right now, before we joined this call, we talk about AI and about what you can do with AI and some of the examples you've been working on.
Yeah, so I agree with you. And that's a great example because I know you like biking. I know you like canoeing. I know you like camping. Occasionally we talk about camping. We've not really talked about the canoeing, kayaking very much. But I know we have talked about those things a couple times. Autistic people tend to want to go towards the things, like some people talk about interesting things to build a rapport. Some people talk about interesting things because it's part of their interaction. And I think some of that is with you and I, we're both in technology. We're both looking at new things. So we talk about new topics like that. And AI is a new topic. And then there's a certain amount of one of my ASPE powers. I'm very good at presenting. I'm very good at training. So I can give a really good presentation. I'm interactive. I could do like the equivalent of a TED talk very well. Very good at that. And my wife doesn't get it because she doesn't line that up with what she thinks of an autistic person. But I do horribly in a cocktail party. So the reason is because I can almost go into autopilot. So if we're talking about AI, it's a topic that I'm comfortable with. I can almost act on autopilot. But if you and I met in a cocktail party, I would stand there silent. Now, if you brought up AI, I would go from nothing to running 100 miles an hour talking about AI.
And it's part of soft skills, is find these hooks, what motivate others. And I think everyone has their own hooks, as we spoke right now. And as you mentioned, even autistic person doesn't mean they don't have any hobbies. They
Oh
just
yeah, they
maybe
have
not
hobbies.
all the time want to talk about start the conversation about the hobby. But if you find the correct way to hook, you will talk about the hobbies they like.
Yep.
And I think it's very, very important. We all have hobbies. We all have interests, whatever it is. There is always something to talk about it, not just to being social, but because there's also something interested in this. Could be travel. It could be food. It could be, even if it's the same food, there's many different ways to switch the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is another one of the soft skills I have had to practice is thinking of what are the 5 or 10 conversations that I can possibly ask somebody to get more into the, thinking of canoeing and kayaking. I used to canoe down the Russian River every year as a growing up. When I go into a party, I sort of mentally prepare what are the 5 or 10 things I can ask a group or an individual so that I can get into the current and talk about something I'm comfortable with. So it's as much as I'm trying to engage with them, I'm also trying to get into the current where I feel comfortable. I can't force a channel. I can only find one where I'm comfortable.
Such an amazing example, especially because I'm canoeing, because you cannot force the river. Doesn't matter what you do, how strong you are, the river will do what the river wants to do. Doesn't care about what you want. And I think this example is phenomenal because it doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter what you think about yourself. You can always prepare ideas and topics where you're comfortable talking about. This could be related to you. So you almost like we can think about it like you can read jokes and funny stories before in case somebody asks you, you can have a prepared joke or prepared story that you can tell the people because you want to be ready and engage.
Yep. Yeah, and I have a very rich background in terms of stuff I've done. So, I've done stuff on the technology side, I've done stuff on the Hollywood side, all of which are very interesting. So I can pick from stories to tell that tie into different aspects of people's conversations, makes me look interesting, and gives me a block of time where it's like, oh yeah, that fits that story. I can tell that story, even if it's something like in the early 90s, I built an ISP for Arthur C. Clarke in Sri Lanka. Like total random oddball thing. But if you're talking about internet connections or somebody mentions dial-up internet, Then you go, oh, dial-up internet. Yeah, I built that for blah, blah, blah. And it gets you that point, that inflection point. So that is one of the things. But the flip side of that is I've also had to learn, and I think this is more of an autistic soft skill than probably a regular soft skill, is I have to make sure to dial that down. I might be able to tell the story for 10 minutes, but in this environment, I've got to tell it for 2 minutes. Or, hey, I could go on talking for a half an hour without taking a breath on AI and how you can use it, but that's not appropriate in this environment. And that's one of the things that I still struggle with, is knowing when I've gone too far or too long, or I've started the thing in a way where it's like, oh, I mentally started the 10-minute version and I should have started the 1-minute version.
I think it's applicable to a lot of people as well, because in the current environment, when we have TikToks, shorts, and everything, this small piece of information, we do want to be concise. We want to be to the point. And it depends. If you're near a campfire playing guitar and having a beer, there's probably a time for a long story. If you're in a cocktail party or you met somewhere in an elevator, you want to be able to explain a story, what you do, why you're here, in a very, very concise manner. So it's a amazing exercise for anyone. Doesn't matter what you do, you should be able to tell a long story, able to tell a short story, or to be able to tell a story in 2 sentences about what you do, for example, and how you got here. Let's talk a bit more about the younger generation, or probably let's do two things. So first of all, younger generation, and then talk about somebody watching this and they think they have autism, or maybe they have autism, where they should start with soft skills. So pick one or another and we can go from there.
Yeah, so I think, I'll briefly touch the autism one first, because I think it naturally feeds in. It's sort of know thyself. If you feel, there are plenty of resources on autism. There's plenty of like, take this test and figure out, score 50 out of X on this test and you're probably autistic. There's lots of things. And just because you share a few traits doesn't necessarily mean you are autistic, but it is, again, a spectrum. But it's all about understanding yourself. Now that I understood what it means to be autistic, it let me understand the problems I was having in the business world. And then I could address them. But when I didn't know that, I couldn't address them because I didn't know why it was happening. I couldn't understand why it was happening. And it took me a while to sort of take ownership of what I could, but also give up ownership of things like I couldn't control that. So I had friction with a couple people when I started Red Seal Networks, and they had a lot of friction with me. And I think ultimately it was because I did not have a college degree. They had a lot of college, and I could understand stuff intellectually and a bunch of other things, whereas they had to think about it and work harder at it. So they didn't like that I could do this much more rapidly, even though I didn't have a college degree. So I had to know that and adjust how I did things because of that. So I think as you're going into the business world, as you're going up into the, especially with, middle school, high school, et cetera, and you're starting to expand beyond just like a grade school classroom and broadening your social environment, going into a job, knowing your environment, knowing the people, and understanding that people behave and interact differently. One of my big frustration points with my kids is their infatuation with TikTok. And I see some of the value with TikTok, but I also see some of the detriment in TikTok where people are just watching very short clips for a long period, I'm going to sit here and watch 10-second TikTok videos for an hour. So you're not necessarily focused on one topic. And I think it shapes how certain people think, and certain people, how they think concepts are delivered, and don't necessarily think that everybody's going to learn like that. Or that a comment, so I just saw a story about Jodie Foster commenting on Gen Z and complaining about their misspellings and everything. And the response she got was, oh, you're upset that I misspelled this? Isn't that limiting of me? And it's like, maybe, but if you don't have punctuation and you're misspelling, et cetera, it's harder for me to understand. So by doing this, you're actually limiting my understanding of what you're trying to tell me. It's not just that I'm limiting you, saying you can't use slang, you can't use mispronunciation or mispunctuation, misspellings, etc. You have to understand that everything is in some ways a compromise. We use language so that we can communicate. That, in essence, was a compromise around dog means dog. It doesn't mean car. We had to compromise that dog means dog. I think as you're coming up, you may ideally like to learn about things via TikTok or short form YouTube videos, or you might be somebody who likes learning on YouTube, but you'll sit there and watch an hour-long video on a topic or watch hours worth of things on the same topic. Just realize that people communicate in different ways. And when somebody asks you, can you please punctuate? Can you please do this? They're not necessarily being limiting to you. They're looking at, hey, I need to understand this. Or, hey, our target audience isn't just this group of people who resonates with that. We're also marketing to these people. And I have an odd project that I'm working on with a buddy of mine in Hollywood, where we're looking at films and how you can adjust something in the script to allow you to gain a whole new audience. When you communicate, some of those soft skills is you're trying to make sure that you can communicate with people the fastest. And I always tell people in go to market, people don't buy the best product. Hands down, I will argue all day long about this. They don't buy the best product. They buy the product where they can understand the value the quickest.
It's amazing.
Most times, and at last line, they arguably have the best sandbox ever built for most situations. Not all situations, but most situations. However, I would also argue that 90% of the world doesn't understand how to test that sandbox to determine that it is the best sandbox. So how can they possibly buy the best product if they didn't build it? They're users of the technology. If they could build the best of something, they probably wouldn't be a consumer of those products. So again, that soft skill is about making sure that you're delivering a message, and you're delivering that message in a way that it can be heard, and you've done enough of that soft skill beginning so that they have picked up the phone. They are ready to receive your message. Because if you haven't at least done the pleasantries of, hey, how are you doing? Good day, etc. Even if you send the best message, the door is shut. Another buddy of mine, I love his response. Every time we'd get on a meeting, I'd ask Mike Fleck, hey, how's it going today, Mike? Best day ever. And like everybody who knows Mike for saying that every time he gets on a meeting. But it's just the way he says it, it just like, it opens up. You've got that channel flowing, and it's ready to receive the message. Now you have to make sure the message is there.
Right. Brian, we have apparently been talking for 40 minutes. I have no idea how. I just realized it's been a long time, and we didn't even cover everything I wanted to cover. So I have an idea. We'll talk after that, and we'll let the people that listen to us later on how we can continue to do this more. Thank you very much. I really enjoyed the conversation. I learned a lot. I hope the people who are going to listen to us and watch us will learn a lot. Thank you for sharing your story and opening up as well.
Thanks very much. I'm getting happy to be here.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for listening to the Power of Soft Skills in Sales. Remember, the best sales teams aren't just great talkers and deeply technical. They know how to listen, ask questions, guide, and connect on a human level. Enjoy the episode? Please subscribe, leave a review, and share it with someone who benefit. For more tips and insights, visit softskillstech.ca or .com. Until next time, keep sharpening your soft skills and unlocking your full potential. Check out the next episode and subscribe to our newsletter. See you soon!